Right. Much appreciate it. All right, the real reason that we arrested Nicolas Maduro. Let's check it out. All right, welcome to Rob Schmitt Tonight. Early Saturday morning, the U.S. military reminded the world who we are. The extraction of dictator Nicolas Maduro from a fortress at a military base in Caracas, Venezuela, was simply incredible. If you haven't read all the details, I advise that you do. Armed with Maduro's exact location, thanks to a turncoat in the dictator's inner circle, more than 150 of our military aircraft swarmed the capital city's airspace. You can see just some of that video from somebody that was watching late in the night. Fighter jets blew up the regime's anti-air defense. The power was knocked out in the city. And then choppers filled with Delta Force operatives landed on the roof of the building that Maduro was hunkered inside with his wife, guarded by a large Cuban security team. 32 of Maduro's bodyguards were killed before Maduro and his wife were ripped from their bedroom and flown back to an American ship in the Caribbean. What a wake-up call for this man. No Americans were killed. No assets were lost. Much like Iran, another perfect operation for Pete Hegseth. Very impressive stuff. Our military reminding the world, don't mess with the U.S. And we again have leaders with testosterone.
The United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela. All Venezuelan military capacities were rendered powerless as the men and women of our military successfully captured Maduro in the dead of night.
Nicolas Maduro had his chance, just like Iran had their chance, until they didn't and until he didn't. He effed around and he found out.
Something else. Maduro effed around and he found out something that he thought would never happen. In fact, a reminder, here was Nicolas Maduro earlier this year taunting the Americans, taunting our president.
Venga por mí. Aquí lo esperan Miraflores. No se tarde en llegar, cobarde.
Don't take too long to arrive, coward. Maduro screamed at the president of the United States. You think he's regretting those words tonight, sitting in a jail in Brooklyn? Maduro maybe thought a U.S.-assisted domestic coup would be tried, one that his security team could whisk him to safety from. He never expected the hellstorm that Caracas saw on Saturday morning at 2 o'clock a.m. But now we get to the real question, which is why this happened. Why did we just take Nicolas Maduro and bring him to New York? The Trump administration has answered that question for weeks now, heavily with drugs and drug running as the excuse. And perhaps drugs gives them the ability to operate free of congressional restraint, which they wanted to do. The real reason that Maduro is sitting in a prison here in New York is much larger than that. For decades, the West has been run by incompetence, by fools who have no idea how to sustain and protect something so beautiful and so vulnerable, what we have. The people we let run the West are mostly horrific and very incompetent. And in that time, last several decades, our enemies have grown much bolder. The West has become significantly weaker. Look at Europe right now. It's all moving this way as well. Much weaker and much more heavily targeted by our adversaries. And this administration, Trump, Rubio, and others, have had enough of that. Venezuela is a once rich nation destroyed by the communist criminal cartel that's controlled it for decades now. Venezuela is a Western foothold for the devious powers seeking to destroy the United States. Iran, its proxy terror groups like Hezbollah, China, Russia, all have a home in Venezuela, which is a very short flight from South Florida. The regime running Venezuela has stolen and plundered the country's wealth, prioritizing anti-Western, anti-democratic political agendas over feeding its own people. Here's the president.
This isn't a country like we have to travel 24 hours in an airplane. This is Venezuela. It's in our area, the Don Road Doctrine. We're in the business of having countries around us that are viable and successful, and where the oil is allowed to freely come out because that's good. It gets the prices down. That's good for our country. We have a very sick neighbor. It's not a neighbor, but it's close to a neighbor. And that's Venezuela. It's very sick. Colombia is very sick, too, run by a sick man.
So the plan here, again, it's more than about drugs, and it's a lot about maybe cleaning up an entire hemisphere. Colombia could very well be next, he says. The neighboring nation with a communist president, who Trump says is also a drug dealer. Cuba is also on that list. Cuba very reliant on Venezuela. Now that Venezuela is going to be controlled by the United States, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to Cuba. Our leaders have had enough of Latin American communism, and Latin American communism aligning itself with our worst enemies around the world, embezzling their nation's wealth to undermine the United States while they live right down the street. Marxist states that spend all their fortune threatening our prosperity. What's been funniest to watch about all this in the aftermath is the fury from American Democrats over the arrest of Nicolas Maduro. Democrats are enraged that a violent dictator who tortures and starves his people is being held to account, either because Nicolas Maduro ran his country in a way that they admired, or because his arrest and what's happening right now is a stark reminder to Americans of just how dangerous the ideology they now spew really is. It is yet another disaster for Democrats who are embracing socialism, embracing collectivism. We're seeing this all over the party right now. Maduro and New York's new mayor sound identical. Dictators choose collectivism as a platform because it is the easiest route to power. Maduro talks about all the time about how he's conservative. He's socially conservative. Why does he spew communist talking points? Because that's the easiest way to get into power. There will always be fewer haves than have-nots. And the have-nots tend to be very easily manipulated. It's very easy to blame the rich and to offer free stuff. It sounds great. Selling socialism to the uninformed masses is like selling candy to a baby. Vote for me. I'll give you somebody else's money. What a great scam. By the time people realize it was all a scam, as you saw in Venezuela and so many other countries, the power has been consolidated, and if you complain, they blow your brains out. Senator Tommy Tuberville is on the Senate Armed Services Committee, joins us now from Washington. Sir, good to have you. Administration officials just gave some members of Congress a briefing about what we saw early on Saturday morning in this amazing military display. Have you gotten any indication of what's been said, what's been revealed, anything new?
No, I haven't heard. There won't be anything new. They just probably showed pictures of what really happened in true time. And so, at the end of the day, the Democrats, they'd have screamed bloody murder if they'd not got to see some of this video. Republicans, we don't care. We want to go on with life. We did the right thing. President Trump did the right thing. And let's get on with helping the country be number one again.
Are we cleaning up South America and Latin America? I mean, is this the start of a process that's going to go further?
Well, it started with Panama. If you remember President Trump, when he gets into office, he goes down to Panama and making sure that, hey, listen, we built that canal. We gave it to you. China's not taking control of it. We're going to move back in and help you maintain it and have a little bit more say-so of what goes on. Then he goes down, obviously, to Venezuela. He's been telling this guy, listen, I'm getting ready to take you out of power. You might as well step out. Sooner or later, people are going to start understanding what President Trump says he means. We finally got a president that believes in law and order. Now, the Democrats don't believe in that. They would rather have a confusion, a lawlessness all over the country, all over the South America. But this is a central point of where all the communists, all the terrorists, all the people that run, this is where they unite and work together down there. So President Trump has blown it up. He's going to move to Colombia next. If the guy Pedro over there, the president, keeps running his mouth, and of course he's going to move north up to Cuba. We need a safe hemisphere, and because we are getting hit from every side from these people in South America, including Mexico, by the way.
Yeah. Mexico is a whole other conversation. And our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, here on why exactly Maduro was arrested, what's really going on. Just take a listen to this.
We are not going to be able to allow in our hemisphere a country that becomes a crossroads for the activities of all of our adversaries around the world. or just can't allow it. We can't have a country where the people in charge of its military and in charge of its police department are openly cooperating with drug trafficking organizations. We're not going to allow that. These things are direct threats to the United States, and we intend to use every element of leverage that we have to ensure that that changes.
I mean, how important is it to get this mission accomplished? I think a lot of people were wary of when they were talking about how it was about drug running and drug boats. A lot of people were worried if that was really the answer. I didn't really believe that was a full answer either, because again, you would look at Mexico or Colombia. If you really wanted to get rid of drugs, you probably would start somewhere else. Although Venezuela's, they're bad actors for sure. But I believe much more the idea that you can't allow a nation like Venezuela to be a safe harbor for the worst countries in the world and have it so close to the United States. That's obviously something they're going to utilize, and that rot needs to be cleaned out.
Yeah, you saw what happened during the mass immigration of Joe Biden, just opening the doors of our borders, and it all instigated down there. I was in Colombia not too long ago, and Colombia took in several million people from Venezuela that come across the border because they didn't want to go all the way to the United States. But they did make sure that all the prisoners, all the crooks, all the criminals that were run out of the prisons in Venezuela came all the way to the United States. We got a lot of people here, Rob. We got a lot of problems, but President Trump is going to clean this mess up, and Democrats just get out of the way and let a man do a job, a man's job.
Is the right move to allow the vice president of Maduro, a loyalist to Maduro, to run the country rather than this opposition party that got 70% of the vote?
No, she's as big a criminal as Maduro. So at the end of the day, President Trump knows it's got to be cleaned up. I don't know how it's going to happen, but he'll make sure that there's a free and fair election and let the people of Venezuela pick their president. Yeah. That's what they did last time, but this dictator, Maduro, wouldn't leave. Yeah. So he said, hey, I'm staying here. I've got control. I've got control of the military. And when you control the military of any country, you control that country. And that especially is the case when you're involved in Central America. So
we control her until there's an election, and then you're done with her. I got two more really quick. You mentioned Mexico and the cartels in Mexico and the damage that they do to this country. Do you think there's a possibility that at some point this administration goes to the Mexican government and says, we are going to clean your country, we're going to rid your country of these cartels, you're going to let us do it?
Yeah, well, President Trump's tried to work with this new president, this lady down there in Mexico. Now, we, from my state of Alabama, they have confiscated companies that are American companies in Mexico in the last 2 years. They basically came in and said, you're out, we're taking over. So they're doing the same thing as Venezuela used to do, and this took total control. Now they're on our back door. President Trump is not going to put up with that. So we need a better relationship with Mexico, but when you have a cartel and a corrupt politicians like they have in Mexico, it's hard to have a good relationship with them.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens with that side of the story. He hates those cartels, and he's obviously making some moves to our south. Before I let you go, one final question. The seditious six, they called them, the Democrats that made that video months ago, urging military members to refuse orders that they themselves deem illegal. It was a move obviously aimed at undermining our military order and discipline. And today, the War Secretary Hegseth announcing administrative action against Senator Mark Kelly, who is kind of the forerunner of the video, issuing a formal letter of censure and initiating retirement grade determination proceedings with reduction in his retired grade, resulting in a corresponding reduction in his pension. What do you make of that move?
Well, first of all, he didn't speak on behalf of being a senator. He spoke on behalf of being a captain in the military. He's got a military code that he has to go by. And, it's like any code that you have. If you've got a code you have to go by, you have to, no matter whether you're active or whether you're retired, you should continue to have to go by that code. So, I've talked to Secretary Hegseth about it. I've talked to a lot of people in the Pentagon about it. And I didn't know which direction they were going, but obviously this is a situation where they need to get under control. But these people are just trying to make headlines. They're all trying to run for president. And so they're trying to push a narrative. And we don't want to make martyrs out of these people because that's what will eventually happen. But they need to be punished for what they did. You cannot undermine our military nor our country, especially if you have been in the military and you are a United States senator. Yeah,
destabilizing a military that's been made so much stronger in the last 9-10 months, certainly.
Exactly.
Senator Tommy Tuberville, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. Jack Posobiec is a former Navy intel officer, TPUSA contributor. Vianca Rodriguez, a former deputy Hispanic communications director for the RNC. Good to have you both here. Jack, I want to start with you. Do you think we're about to completely reconfigure Latin America? Is it going to be, are we starting Venezuela, then Cuba, Colombia? Are we going to try and rid communism and this kind of activity from the Western Hemisphere?
Well, wouldn't I love to see that? Maybe Bukele could be the vassal head of the empire down there. No, I think what we're seeing here is a situation where President Trump and Secretary of State Rubio understand that this is about pushing not just communists out of power. So they've gone from Maduro, look at him. He went from seizing the means of production to being seized himself by Delta Force. They understand, though, that this isn't George W. Bush-style regime change where they're going to smash the entire government, get rid of all of the infrastructure, and try to rebuild this nation-building, democracy-building project like we saw in Iraq, like we saw in Afghanistan, failed policy 20 years. They are going to work with the infrastructure in place while they all know that those who are still there have the message of what happens if they step out of line.
Interesting. Vianca, this is a remarkably important moment, I think, for Americans to see as we have a Democrat Party that's trying to woo, I think, their base with ideas of collectivism and socialism. All of these ideas we're hearing the New York mayor talk about just the last couple of days. Complaints about cost of living and the crisis that they created and wanting to fix it with these kinds of ideas. To see what can happen to a country and to see it right in front of their face, to see Venezuelans by the millions celebrating the removal of this dictator that sold them all these promises of free things. How important is that for people here in this country to absorb?
It's very important. I mean, I think it's absolutely insane that this past weekend I saw fellow Puerto Ricans, I'm Puerto Rican myself, but I actually saw Puerto Ricans going out to the streets to protest what happened. Meanwhile, we had Venezuelans in Puerto Rico and just nationwide in Doral, Florida, especially celebrating what happened. And that really just goes to show how out of touch the average American, especially the liberal American in this country, is with the majority of Hispanic communities, but especially the Venezuelan community in this instance. And, I think it's perfect timing as well because Zoran Mamdani is now the newly elected socialist mayor of New York City. But at the same time, we're having Nicolas Maduro having his justice served in his own district, in his own backyard. And so I think we're going to see a lot of people hopefully wake up as we continue to talk about how relevant this threat of socialism is today, and just potentially wake up a lot more people to really just the consequences of this. It
really is something to have this all happening in New York City just days after Mamdani takes power. But Jack, the same question to you. I mean, what do you think when you see mostly white liberals in the streets protesting the arrest of this man? And they are oblivious to what he has done. They refuse to accept it. All they hear is his politics, and they find him to be a hero. That's just despicable.
Well, you hear so many of these same people are the ones that voted for Mamdani just a couple of months ago, and they're watching and cheering as he's sworn in. He calls it the warmth of collectivism. Why don't you go on down to Venezuela and ask them about the warmth of collectivism and how it's done since there? Venezuela, prior to the Bolivarian regime taking power in the late 90s and then really, really getting going after 2002, this was one of the most wealthy countries in all of Latin America. It was one of the most wealthy countries per capita in the entire world, was raking in the standard of living, you could put it up next to the United States of America, you could put it up next to Europe, and it was completely destroyed by the communists. You look at what's going on down there, basic supplies, food that they have issues with. This is the warmth of collectivism. And what do we know? We know that the exact same thing happens every single time it's tried, because this is what they do. From the communists in Russia to the communists in the Warsaw Pact to the communists in Spain, it always ends in millions dead. And if you don't believe me, go ask the Chinese, because the people of China will tell you what's happened with the Chinese Communist Party.
That's right. The warmth of collectivism. In Venezuela, it's 90 degrees. You have no AC. You have no water. It's very warm. The warmth of collectivism. All right, that's good. All right, Jack Posobiec, Vianca Rodriguez, thank you both so much. We appreciate it, guys. Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves, and we now control them. What this could mean for our economy, for our cost of living, economist Stephen Moore up next.
You served your country with honor. Now get the benefits you've rightfully earned. Paul R. Lawrence has written the book every veteran should own, Veterans Benefits for You. This step-by-step guide breaks down what you need to know, from financial compensation and disabilities to information for dependents and parents. This book is a must-read for all servicemen and women. Get your free copy today with our special offer. Call the number on your screen or go online to order.
A new year brings new threats, and Cyberman's ready for every one of them. While hackers plot their next move, Cyberman's already there, protecting families, businesses, and governments before danger can strike. This year, protect what matters most with easy-to-use, award-winning protection. With PCmatic, you get American-made protection that's faster, smarter, and stronger. Start 2026 with confidence. Visit PCmatic.com today.
I'm Elmer Heinrich, the 91-year-old formulator of Immuno 150, an incredible nutritional supplement. There's nothing like it. Now, Immuno 150 is different because it contains 70 plant-derived minerals and 80 other nutrients. Dr. Linus Pauling, known for vitamin C, was instrumental in convincing me to get into the mineral business in 1983. He said the world is sick due to a lack of minerals in topsoil. He said the body needs 60 minerals, but the average food and supplement has no more than 12. That's the reason for Immuno 150. Since its inception, it's had a powerful impact on the lives of thousands of people who could not get any help from various supplements they took or their doctor. Now, I suggest you try Immuno 150 to see what 70 minerals, CoQ10, and 80 nutrients can do for you. Look at the videos on our website. Millions have. Now, consider placing an order for Immuno 150 online or call our toll-free number. I know you'll be glad you did.
Mike Hammond here, founder of Signal Relief. Meet Dr. Beth Dupree, breast cancer surgeon for over 35 years.
In my surgical career, I have treated thousands of patients, and finding effective pain relief has always been a priority. Believe me, I was skeptical, but Signal Relief caught my attention because it actually works. Clinical trials show over 85% of participants felt relief within 72 hours, with nearly half noticing a significant difference in just 15 minutes. Just place it near or above wherever you have the pain, whether it's your back, your shoulder, your neck, or your knee. Signal Relief Patch brings proven relief. I recommend it to my patients, family, and friends, and I get to witness and experience their pain relief firsthand, and that brings a smile to my face.
Join the hundreds of thousands who have experienced relief with the Signal Relief Patch, and it comes with a money-back guarantee. Trust Dr. Dupree and me. The patch works.
And the oil companies are ready to go. They're going to go in, they're going to rebuild the infrastructure. You know, we built it to start off with many years ago. They took it away. You can't do that. The oil companies are going to go in and rebuild their system. They're going to spend billions of dollars, and they're going to take the oil out of the ground, and we're taking back what they sold.
Okay, so this is a really interesting part of this big story, right? The president talking Venezuelan oil on Air Force One last night coming home, saying that America is now in control of the largest oil deposit on the planet, bigger than Saudi Arabia and Iran, and it only cost us a few bullets and chopper fuel. A top Wall Street consultant telling the Wall Street Journal that he's planning a trip to Venezuela with officials from top hedge funds and asset managers to determine whether there are investment prospects in the country under this new leadership. Adding the trip will feature about 20 officials from the finance, energy, and defense sectors, among other places. J.P. Morgan predicting with new investments and major institutional reforms, oil output could potentially expand to 2.5 million barrels per day out of Venezuela over the next decade. Right now, they haven't maintained any of this. They've been just trying to squeeze as much as they can out of the ground. The rest of the country is failing. It's been a disaster the way these communists have run this country, and they won't leave. They won't get out of power. Imagine what control of the world's largest oil reserves could do for our economy and for our gas and energy costs in this country. It's something to really think about. Oil company stocks surging after Maduro's capture, and economist Steve Moore has advised the president, also the co-founder of Unleash Prosperity, and with us now. All right, Steve, we are now controlling Venezuela. What does that mean from your perspective?
Well, first of all, Venezuela does have as much oil as Saudi Arabia. So think about that, Rob. I mean, this is well over $1 trillion asset that the Venezuelan people have. And one of the tragedies of the Maduro administration, if you'll call it that, was that their oil output fell by 2/3. So the one asset that the country had that was the most valuable, they ruined it. And what we don't know, Rob, is what condition are those wells in? You know, how long will it take to rebuild their oil infrastructure so that this can hit the market? I believe the best thing that could be done is for the new regime, when it comes in, when it's democratically elected, is to give every Venezuelan citizen basically a share, some ownership in that national asset, and that will help rebuild the confidence in the new regime as they come in, and it will help lift so many tens of millions of people who live in Venezuela, pull them out of poverty. So now, what impact will this have on the United States if they produce 2 or 3 million more barrels a day? That would drive the oil price to below $50 a barrel.
There we go.
And what that would mean is that we're talking about $2 a gallon gasoline here at home, which would be a huge stimulus to our economy. Do you know who the biggest loser will be, Rob?
OPEC?
Putin. Well, OPEC, but even bigger will be Putin.
Yeah.
I mean, Putin is probably wetting his pants right now because the only asset that the Russians have is their oil, their oil and gas production. And if you have a new major entry into the market with Venezuela producing a lot of oil, this is a good way to maybe put Putin out of business. So there are a lot of aspects to this story.
It's weird because Rachel Maddow told me that Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are best friends, and Trump does whatever he wants. So it's strange that Trump would do this. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm still trying to figure out how Trump is Putin's puppy.
Well, one thing people should realize is that the demand for energy over the next decade, and you and I have talked about this many times, our demand is going to double or triple. So the world needs more energy, more than ever. So it's to the benefit of everyone in the world to have Venezuela produce this energy, so we can have the data centers, so we can have the AI, we can have the robotics that can really lift people's incomes all over the world. And so this is a very good news story.
Yeah, and just I guess my final question is we've for years we've watched oil just spike. At times of, whatever, the international issues and problems, and we've watched it go down. And, sometimes gas costs $4.50 to fill up your car, and it's $100, and sometimes it's $60. Us in control of Venezuela, let's imagine that a proper government is installed, a Western-friendly government is installed in Venezuela. Is that the end of that? Those fears? Is that the end of being reliant on OPEC and the whims of their price desires and all of these other issues? Is that over?
Probably not. I mean, I've lived through the 70s and 80s and 90s, and, the oil is the master resource, and the Saudis have a lot of that oil as well. But listen, I mean, lower energy prices is good for everyone. And I don't like this idea of the United States controlling their energy production. I'm in totally awe of what Donald Trump has done and what our military has done. And in my opinion, we should have an orderly exit and let the Venezuelan people, elect a democratic government and be out. I don't want to see us stay in that region too long because it's not what the Venezuelans want, and I don't think it's what the American people want.
I don't think it's what they want either. I just think they want to know that we've got an ally, in this country, and that oil's not going to Russia and China and Hezbollah. So,
amen.
Where that goes, yeah. Steve Moore, hey, good to see you. Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Those who survived Maduro's reign are celebrating his capture. But there are Americans here in the United States that are protesting this. It is an unbelievable thing that we're watching here on the streets of our own cities. We've got a Venezuelan American reacting to that coming up next.
I switched.
I switched.
I switched.
I switched to Newsmax.
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 Have you made the switch?
You bet I did. My whole family switched.
Millions are switching to Newsmax. You should too.
Anybody who's struggling with alcohol should try Or Health. Within a week, the cravings were completely gone. Or Health is safe, science-backed, and it works. I couldn't believe how easy it was. Alcohol doesn't run my life anymore.
Text Newsmax to 710-710 to learn more.
Drop is finally here.
Drop delivers the weight loss benefits of GLP-1 injections in easy-to-use oral drops, no needles.
That's right. The two big drawbacks with weight loss injections are high costs in weekly injections. Drop is flavorless and odorless, so you can just add it to water or your favorite beverage. Drop offers other advantages over injections too. With Drop, you can personalize your dosage based on your weight loss goals.
And because you add Drop to any liquid, there's no concern about injection site infections, bruising, or dosage confusion.
Drop is the easier, safer, cost-effective alternative to help you achieve your weight loss goals without the needles.
Can't find it anywhere? The Wellness Company has it. No consultation needed. Simply order online and use promo code SLIM to save $100. Visit dropthepounds.com/slim. That's promo code SLIM at dropthepounds.com/slim.
Your data is like a single domino. The moment it's stolen, it starts a chain reaction that puts the information that guards your assets at risk. 1 in 3 Americans have been a victim of identity theft. Are you willing to risk it?
When I saw zeros on that screen as my bank account balance, I went to immediate panic.
$21,000 just gone. I opened my account and $30,000 is missing. Like $30,000. I have no idea what to do.
If your personal information is stolen, are you prepared to pick up the pieces alone? LifeLock is the leader in identity theft protection and restoration.
Once LifeLock got involved, everything changed.
With LifeLock, if your identity is stolen, they'll step in and fix it so you don't have to, guaranteed. Our highly trained U.S.-based restoration specialists contact institutions, dispute fraudulent charges, close compromised accounts, and even procure legal support far beyond the capabilities of your bank or credit card company.
LifeLock pursued this case further than I ever would have imagined.
If you call right now, you'll get LifeLock for just $9.99 a month for your first year. And as extra protection, all LifeLock memberships include the $1 Million Protection Package. Our members receive reimbursement for stolen funds and personal expenses, like lost wages, as well as coverage for lawyers and experts up to $3 million in total.
When the bank refused to reimburse my stolen money, the $1 Million Protection Package came through for me.
Our restoration guarantee and $1 Million Protection Package are included in all memberships with no additional fees.
I think it's natural to think that you can do this on your own. You can't. You need an expert in your corner.
Call 1-800-360-9220 and use promo code TV35 or go to lifelock.com/TV35 to join today.
It really has been something to see celebrations breaking out in Venezuelan communities all over the world after Nicolas Maduro was captured by the U.S. military early Saturday morning. The regime that destroyed their country, that decimated their wealth, and threatened them to never speak up or they might get shot, that regime is ending as we speak. In truth, everyone involved in the Maduro regime should be executed themselves for what they've done to this once prosperous free country and its 30 million residents. But here in the U.S., in our major cities, we find white liberals protesting the arrest of Nicolas Maduro, calling for him to be freed. Yes, rallying outside the detention center where he's being held in Brooklyn, a man in a skirt led the protests on the other side of the country in Seattle.
Hands up, Venezuela! Hands up, Venezuela! Hands up, Venezuela! Hands up, Venezuela! Free President Maduro!
Free President Maduro. That is the cancer of the leftist ideology. That is just it is the epitome of stupidity and how embarrassing it is. Rebeca Ruiz is a Venezuelan American. She joins us now to talk about this. Nate Friedman is an independent journalist who did some great work exposing what these protests actually are. To you both, thanks for coming on. Rebeca, you were born in Venezuela, once a beautiful country, destroyed by Maduro and these Marxist dictators, Chavez. What is your message to the people that have the audacity to protest the arrest of Nicolas Maduro?
Okay, thank you for the invitation. My apologies in advance because my English is not perfect.
Fine.
I am Venezuelan. I am not Venezuelan American.
Oh, pure Venezuelan.
So, but I live in the States.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Sure.
So for me to see and then protesting against the incarceration of Maduro is like seeing your rapist being cheered by a crowd of people. So they are throwing the Palestine flag, and now they are taking the Venezuelan flag. They don't know anything about my country. They don't know anything about any other country. They don't even know if they are a woman or a man, but they know everything about Venezuela now. They didn't say anything when they were killing us, when I was a student from the college, and they were killing us with war weapons, and we didn't have any weapons. But I actually feel happy for them because they are in a free country and they can be protesting. They can be having the free speech right. We can't do that in Venezuela.
Can say anything they want, no matter how stupid it is, no matter how impossibly dumb it is. That's what's amazing. That's a great summation, and thank you for that. Nate, you went to the protest in Times Square here in New York. I want to watch a clip from your video.
You're the leader of the People's Forum. You got $20 million from Roy Neville Singham to protest. Can I ask why you don't want to speak with me right now? Do you deny that you got $20 million to protest? You don't deny that?
20 million from an American multi-millionaire. I believe he lives in China. Singham lives in China and sends money to try and destabilize our country that made him so rich. These people have any idea what they're doing out there? How many of those paid protesters are making up what we're seeing right now?
I saw about at least 10 of them. So many familiar faces. Like when I did the live stream, it was just like everyone, you know, all the familiar faces were there. So yeah, I mean, it's just unbelievable, right? Every time there's a new cause, it was just Palestine. Now everything's fine there. So now Venezuela is the new thing.
And just, I mean, they had nothing to say. They had no answer for you. They just, that's all, they must be admitting it if they didn't deny.
Yeah, it is a fact, but you expect some pushback to that. I mean, it's unbelievable. $20 million to protest, and there's no denial whatsoever.
That's just unbelievable. I got to leave it there, guys. Rebeca Ruiz and Nate Friedman, thank you to you both for coming on. We appreciate it. What a story. The collapse of Tim Walz's political career. Up next.
I've decided to step out of this race, and I'll let others worry about the election.
You know Rob Finnerty. He's smart, bold, and stands strong for your values. Rob is fighting for you. Watch Finnerty weeknights only on Newsmax.
Hungry Root is here, and I needed it because my fridge is super empty.
It's so easy to just whip together a quick, healthy meal.
Head to hungryroot.com for healthy groceries and simple recipes. Plus, get free veggies for life.
Joining us is Dr. Drew from the Wellness Company with advice for dealing with seasonal colds and flu. Doctor?
Cold and flu season is here, and every year your loved one gets sick. Your doctor can't see you. Waiting in a crowded urgent care is brutal. This is a particularly bad cold and flu season, and it's why doctors suggest every family needs an emergency medical kit. Your medical emergency kit is filled with essential prescriptions. It includes antibiotics like generic Z-Pak to get well faster, amoxicillin for pneumonia, strep throat, ear infections, plus prescriptions for nausea and UTIs, and even ivermectin. It's easy. Just match your symptoms to the prescription in your guidebook or call the telemedicine doctor standing by. Take your medication early and feel better faster. Having a medical emergency kit is like having an urgent care in your home. No waiting to see a doctor, no lines at the pharmacy.
Smart advice. We've shared the website and discount code below to save viewers $45. Order now and your kit will be rushed to your door. Thank you, doctor.
When curiosity strikes about the everyday lives of your family, we're here with answers only your ancestors can provide. See their stories before our sale ends.
Between drained investment accounts, lost wages, and hiring lawyers, identity theft can cost you more than you might think. Only LifeLock offers the $1 Million Protection Package with reimbursement up to $3 million. LifeLock. Join today.
I'm Boomer Esiason. My mom died from cancer. She was only 37 years old. And that's why having life insurance is so important to me. Ethos lets you get life insurance in minutes, 100% online, no medical exam.
Check your price today at ethos.com.
It's not just your hearing. For us, it's your life. That's why we created the Miracle Earway, offering unlimited care, including risk-free trials and free servicing to keep you connected with your loved ones at all times. Call 1-800-503-7789.
AI can turn your lights on.
Lights on.
And drive your car. And even write your kid's essay. But AI ain't gonna fix your broken water line or pay for the big repair bill. Having a plan from HomeServe offers real solutions. And when a covered system breaks, we'll send a qualified contractor and pay for the repair. There's nothing artificial about the peace of mind you get with a plan from HomeServe. Getting one is quite intelligent.
Plans from HomeServe start at just $4.99 a month.
Call 1-844-752-2141 or visit homeserve.com.
This is the story of the one who doesn't just see a broken dock, he sees work stalled to a halt. Thankfully, he has Grainger, offering the scale to deliver fast. Call, click Grainger.com, or stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
I really love Balance of Nature.
There's so many vegetables and so many fruits.
I love everything about it.
It's just such a phenomenal product. So, got to keep doing it.
Lock in 50% off for 1 year.
All right, welcome back. A reminder to always stay humble in life. Just 2 days ago, Nicolas Maduro was dancing in Caracas, behaving like this, and before he knew it, he looked like this. Something else, isn't it? Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, yet another example, catapulted to political relevance by a desperate Kamala Harris. The brain-dead Minnesota dunce went from dancing on stage on national television to effectively resigning from politics today. A year ago, he was the biggest thing ever, and today it's over. The billions stolen by Somalians in his state mean the end of the road for the 61-year-old who will forever be a picture of woke, pandering, left-wing incompetence. There is so much of that in this government, in this country. Here was Walz announcing he is no longer running for re-election next year.
As I reflect on this moment with my family and my team over the holidays, I came to the conclusion that I can't give a political campaign my all. So I've decided to step out of this race, and I'll let others worry about the election while I focus on the work that's in front of me for the next year. I'm passing on this race with zero sadness and zero regret.
Yeah, zero sadness. I'm sure he feels great about it. Walz says the buck stops with him and his state, which has just become the epicenter of all of this fraud in this country. But just listen to this part of his big speech today. Listen to this.
I don't want to mince words here. Donald Trump and his allies in Washington and in St. Paul and online want to make our state a colder, meaner place. We've got conspiracy theorist right-wing YouTubers breaking into our daycares, demanding access to our children. We've got the President of the United States demonizing our Somali neighbors and wrongfully confiscating funds that Minnesotans rely on. It's disgusting and it's dangerous. I'm proud of the way we treat our neighbors. I'm proud of the way that we welcome people to this state. No one's taking this away from us. Not the fraudsters, certainly not this president, not on my watch.
What a joke. What a pitiful, pitiful man. Liz Collin is a Minnesota-based journalist with Alpha News. Her reporting has helped to blow the lid off of her corrupted, incompetent state government. She joins us now, former Minnesota Congressman Jason Lewis, who also has been blowing the whistle on this kind of fraud for nearly a decade while he was serving in the House. Also with us, good to have you both here. Jason, I'm going to start with you. You were saying that this, long before anyone else. You were trying to get people to focus on this story.
What an amazing day, from Maduro to Minneapolis. Right. I mean, how the mighty autocrats are falling. It really is quite amazing. And yeah, in 2018, we had information. Everybody knew it, including the Minnesota media, which Liz can speak to. They all knew it. Amy Klobuchar knew it. My successor in the 2nd District, Angie Craig, knew it. And they did nothing. So in that hearing, which has now gone a bit viral, thanks to the president, we said, look, maybe it's time to investigate Minnesota, investigate the federal child care development block grant, the community service block grant program, which we knew were being defrauded and money was being shipped out of Minnesota being MSP Airport, with a number of eyewitness testimony going to that degree. And the HHS Secretary Azar at the time said, well, we're waiting on DHS to investigate this. They're going to get back to us, but we're trying to eliminate the community service block grant program. All right, fast forward, Rob, to 2019, we lose the House. We teed it up for these people to investigate, to cut off these funds, and my successor and all the Democrats did not. And so when you look at the Democrat media complex in Minnesota, they are wholly responsible for this. The blood is on their hands, the blood of the taxpayer funds, that is. And they need to be held accountable, just like poor Tim Walz is being held accountable.
And Klobuchar thinks she's just going to waltz right into the governor's office, and people aren't going to realize that she's somewhat complicit in this, for sure. Liz, I want to talk about what Walz had to say.
That will be the plan of the Minnesota infrastructure. They will rally around Klobuchar. Walz has fallen on the sword. Let's get behind Amy. The Minnesota Business Partnership will support her, and things will keep going just like they have been, I'm afraid.
Just like they have been. Liz, I want to get to what Tim Walz had to say about tackling fraud in his state. I want to get your reaction to it. Take a listen.
Make no mistake, we should be concerned about fraud in our state government. That's why over the past few years, we've made systemic changes in the way we do business. We've gone to the legislature time and time again to get more tools to combat fraud. A single taxpayer dollar wasted on fraud should be intolerable. My administration has been taking fast, decisive action to solve this crisis. We'll win the fight against the fraudsters. And I refuse to spend a single minute doing anything other than rising to meet this moment. Minnesota has always come first and always will.
Your reaction to that, Liz? I mean, he's trying to paint the picture. He's gaslighting the hell out of everybody in this country, painting the picture that he's been going after this problem. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would describe this just as a bizarre press conference. I'm not even sure if you can call it that. He took no questions. It only lasted about 7 or 8 minutes, came off very angry, but was rewriting history, I would say, for what we've seen from him for these last 7 years. Many political scandals on his watch, but this billion-dollar fraud scheme, it seems just too big to keep Governor Tim Walz on the ticket. It's $9 billion and counting, and multiple federal investigations now in Minnesota. And compared to mainstream media picking up on what Jason was talking about here, we've been one of the very few, certainly the most prominent, I'd say, in the state who actually has even criticized the governor at all with our factual reporting. And we have been for several years now with many stories about fraud and many other subjects as well. So I think this is a relief for taxpayers here in Minnesota, but will he avoid accountability? We see James Comer still demanding that he appear in D.C. on February 10th, so we shall see.
I got one quick question. I want a quick answer from both of you. I got 30 seconds left. I'll start with Liz. Do you think this takes down anyone else in your state? Is Ellison going to get taken out by this? Will anyone else feel this heat?
You know, I think the Attorney General has questions to answer. You have Congresswoman Ilhan Omar as well. The list is long in Minnesota. Jason knows this well. Yeah. This certainly isn't just a Governor Walz accountability situation. Many questions that remain unanswered at this point.
Yeah, I think Ilhan Omar certainly knew about this. You know how tight-knit that community is. What do you think, Jason?
That's going to determine whether Minnesota changes or not. If they rally around the flag, circle the wagons, and cover the tracks for every other Democrat, it's going to go on as normal. But if somebody else gets taken down, there's a signal. So we shall see.
Good conversation. Good to have you both on. Liz Collin and former Congressman Jason Lewis, thank you both. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You bet.
Heck of a one-liner from the Steelers head coach. Take a listen.
If my aunt had male parts, she'd be my uncle.
Ring in the new year with a kitchen designed to wow. It's the perfect time to explore our quality kitchen cabinet collections to find the well-crafted style you want. Because for a limited time only, you can get the kitchen of your dreams with 0% APR for 48 months. We'll even help you bring your vision to life with a free 3D design consultation. Hurry, offer ends soon. Only at Cabinets to Go. Designed to wow.
He's breathing. Okay, go again. Children account for 75% of choking deaths.
That's why I recommend everyone have a life vac in your home, car, or business.
The life vac is simple to use. Just place, push, and pull.
Its suction removes an obstruction out of the airway quickly, saving a life.
If you use your life vac for an emergency, we'll replace it for free. Order now.
Go to lifevac.net or call 877-543-3822.
So,
Here is a before of my stomach before Sonobello, and this is after.
This year, don't just lose weight, lose stubborn fat and sagging extra skin permanently at Sonobello.
I had some loose, wiggly skin, and it is no longer there thanks to Sonobello.
Our expert surgeons use micro laser technology to safely target and remove your diet-resistant fat and tighten loose skin permanently.
I wanted the results of the tummy tuck, but not the downtime. I had a 10 out of 10 experience.
We've helped over 300,000 people transform, and we're proud to be America's #1 cosmetic surgery specialist.
In just one visit, Sonobello got rid of my love handles and my belly fat.
Do you want that flat stomach? You go get that flat stomach.
Call Sonobello. Get in there for your free consultation. Do this for you.
Schedule your free, no-obligation consultation. Our flexible payment options make it easy to get started today.
The grind catches up with everyone, even me. That's why I trust Cunol Ultra High Absorption Turmeric to support my joint health. It's the #1 doctor-recommended form of turmeric. It helps you keep doing the things you love at every age. Cunol, the brand I trust.
A new year brings new threats, and Cyberman's ready for every one of them. While hackers plot their next move, Cyberman's already there, protecting families, businesses, and governments before danger can strike. This year, protect what matters most with easy-to-use award-winning protection. With PCmatic, you get American-made protection that's faster, smarter, and stronger. Start 2026 with confidence. Visit PCmatic.com today.
Hi there, I'm Dean Heskin, President and CEO of Swiss America. With trillions of dollars vanishing from the stock portfolios of retiring Americans, many hardworking people I speak with are concerned about the holdings in their IRAs. But I have good news for you. Our team at Swiss America can show you how easy it is to own gold in your IRA. You see, even with economic turmoil all around us, gold continues to not only be a safe haven, but is also increasing to all-time highs. The volatility of markets has created a lot of undue stress for people. Wouldn't you like that peace of mind that diversifying into metals can provide? For over 40 years, Swiss America has helped people just like you own precious metals in your IRAs. So don't miss this opportunity. Call or text our team at the number on your screen to receive a free copy of our Gold IRA brochure today.
You prepare for the unexpected. So do we. True Work builds workwear offering technical performance fabrics and an integrated workwear system, so you can perform at your best. Work wonders. True Work.
Welcome back. Time now for news from the left. We're going to do a little sports here to start off with. Last night, there was a great Sunday night game, by the way. The Steelers won their division after a missed field goal from the Baltimore Ravens. So you got Aaron Rodgers at like 42 years old going to the playoffs, which is just amazing. The Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin, holding a presser after the game, had an all-time one-liner when describing the end of the game that might actually offend our friends in the trans community, though.
How can you put into words just the thin line between if they make that kick, season's over, comes to a screeching halt, and missing that kick and the winter going on?
You know how it is. If my aunt had male parts, she'd be my uncle.
That's a hell of an answer to a question like that. I don't think the reporter had a follow-up. I think they just moved right along after that one. Next up, the Zoran Mamdani administration here in New York, been in power for, 4 days now, building up the whole team and finding some of the worst possible people that he could possibly find. Zoran is the newly appointed director of the city office to protect tenants, is a young woman named Sia Weaver, who is a white female communist. Doesn't she look like one? Making statements in her past on her X account, which is now deleted, calling to seize private property, blasting home ownership. Weaver posting on X back in August 2019, private property, including and kind of especially home ownership, is a weapon of white supremacy, masquerading as wealth-building public policy. Yes, having a home, owning a home is white supremacy. The thing that makes the West so great, that you get a piece of it, that some of it's yours, that you have freedom, that you have your own land, is white supremacy. Here she was in 2021 doubling down on that.
For centuries, we've really treated
property as an individualized good and not a collective good. And we are going to transitioning to treating it as a collective good. And it will mean that families, especially white families, but some POC families who are homeowners as well, are going to have a different relationship to property than the one that we currently have.
Yeah. She thinks she's going to be the one that decimates private property in the United States of America. I bet you that Nimrod is weeping today over Nicolas Maduro, by the way. I'm sure she is. And again, this is exactly what people that voted for that need to see. I'm so happy that this trial is going to take place right here in New York. It's going to be shoved down all these Mamdani voters' throats. This is exactly what you vote for. And finally, it's really looking like our favorite couple is getting back together. Saturday night, Mar-a-Lago, this picture posted, Trump and Elon dining together with Melania. It was the most heartbreaking breakup that we saw in 2025. Elon looks pretty happy in the picture and giving a hand to Trump with Venezuela. Starlink providing free internet service to the people of the country through February 3rd as they go through this very uncertain time. They're going to have access to real information on the internet. Trump on Air Force One asked about Elon and how the relationship is going. Had to play it cool.
Elon's great. I say about Elon, he's 80% super genius and 20% he makes mistakes. But he's a good guy. He's a well-meaning person.
Isn't that just adorable? Aren't you happy to see them getting closer again? Doesn't it warm your heart on this cold January day? All right, coming up next, about 6 hours before we extracted Nicolas Maduro, I had a weird suspicion something was up. I'm going to tell you why up next.
You know Rob Finnerty. He's smart, bold, and stands strong for your values. Rob is fighting for you. Watch Finnerty weeknights only on Newsmax.
Life with ear ringing sounded like a constant train whistle I couldn't escape. Then I started taking lipoflavonoid. With 60 years of clinical experience, it's the #1 doctor-recommended brand for ear ringing. And now I'm finally free. Take back control with lipoflavonoid.
It's fun for me to win on the course, but it's even more fun to win on Deal Dash.
Lori won $2,000 Tiffany earrings for just $1, and Joseph won an iPad for just $6. There's millions of fast auctions. So try today at DealDash.com for $50 of free credit and your first win guaranteed.
As a cardiologist, when I put my patients on a statin to reduce cholesterol, I also tell them it can deplete their CoQ10 levels. I recommend taking Cunol CoQ10. Cunol has 3 times better absorption than regular CoQ10. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Leaf Filter Gutter Protection helps prevent costly damage to your home, like rotting fascia, soffit, and foundation damage. But not all gutter protection is the same. Let's put them to the test. In heavy rain, these hood-style guards just can't keep up. In lighter rain, debris can flow into the gap. It's like an invitation. Don't give debris an invitation. Filter it out with Leaf Filter.
Schedule your free gutter inspection today. Call 833-LEAF-FILTER or visit leaffilter.com.
At Bright Star Care, our nurse-led care anticipates needs before they are voiced. We'll be there.
With riots and violent looting going on all over the country, I don't feel safe leaving the house without this banana. Normally, I would be worried about this creepy guy, but I've got my banana with me. That same car has been sitting outside my house for a while now. Better keep this banana by the door.
Sounds ridiculous, right? Now imagine this banana was capable of incapacitating an attacker from over 60 feet.
At Byrna, we don't sell bananas. Go to Byrna.com to learn more.
Introducing Stogo, the only apparel with adjustable medical-grade support engineered with high-strength cables that reinforce the body, designed to help you overcome injuries, minimize pain, and regain the confidence to get back out there. Learn more at Stoco.com.
It's our America. We built it. Courage, freedom. Millions go to Newsmax when they need to know. Start today on the free Newsmax app. Newsmax is real news for real people.
All right, finally tonight, maybe about 6 hours before the U.S. military extracted Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela, I kind of had a weird suspicion that something was going on. I'm going to tell you why, because it's kind of a cool story. I had dinner at Mar-a-Lago Friday. A friend of mine gave me the invite. I show up, we walking up to the door, and I see Rubio, and by the way, that's all of us, don't we look beautiful? Rob, I look in the window and I see Rubio in a dining room that's empty on the phone. And he's just pacing and he looks like something's really going on. Go outside to dinner, see where Trump's sitting, whatever. And I see Rubio and Stephen Miller at the table next to him. Rubio's up every 5 minutes during that dinner on the phone talking to Trump, back on the phone talking to Trump. Trump had the Joint Chiefs with him, the chair of the Joint Chiefs. And all of a sudden I'm feeling like something's up. Like something's definitely going on.
Friday night?
This is Friday night at about 8, 9 o'clock at night. And then at like 5 a.m., I got up in the middle of the night, checked the phone, and we had just taken Maduro out of Venezuela. I was like, that's what it was.
That was it.
That's what it was.
You were at Mar-a-Lago. I was at Texas Roadhouse.
Hey,
and
I like some Texas Roadhouse.
Absolutely. Pretty wild, though. Pretty wild. Rob,
it's the story. It's the biggest story. I love it. I love it.
Good to see you, Rob.